We're moving in a more agile direction, Frank. Streamlining. The board wants to consolidate operational oversight. The words hung in the sterile air of the conference room, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and corporate cowardice. They thought firing me would be the end of the story. They were wrong. My name is Franklin Wells. I'm 55 years old. For 23 of those years, I was the director of import and export for global market imports. It's a title that sounds important, but fails to capture the reality. I wasn't just a director. I was the foundation. The man delivering the news was Brendan Croft. 32 years old, with a Wharton MBA, a tailored Brioni suit that probably cost more than my first car, and the unearned confidence of a man who was born on third base and thought he'd hit a triple. He was the son of the senior partner at the private equity firm that had acquired GMI 6 months prior. His official title was Chief Synergy Officer, a meaningless string of words that gave him the authority to ruin lives. He slid a leather-bound folder across the polished mahogany table. "We've put together a generous severance package. 6 weeks' pay, plus your accrued vacation time. You'll sign the standard non-disclosure and non-compete." I didn't open it. I looked past him at the silent HR manager, a woman named Carol, who was studying the grain of the table as if it held the secrets of the universe. She couldn't meet my eye. "I see," I said. My voice was steady. A dead calm settled over me, the kind I learned to trust in my 12 years in Navy logistics. It's the feeling you get right before the storm hits, when the air goes still and the world holds its breath. It's the moment you stop reacting and start observing. Brendan smiled, a flash of perfectly white teeth. He thought my calm was acceptance, defeat. "This is a necessary step for our digital transformation. We appreciate your years of service, of course, but the future is about integrated platforms, not analog experience." Analog experience. That's what he called the 23 years I'd spent building this company's entire international supply chain, from a single desk and a Rolodex into a $450 million a year operation. Security would escort me out. My laptop would be remotely wiped. My access card was already deactivated. The humiliation was precise, efficient, and utterly impersonal. It was 3:15 p.m. on a Tuesday. By 3:30 p.m., I was standing on the curb, holding a small cardboard box with a framed photo of my daughter, Sarah, a coffee mug she'd made me in high school, and a worn copy of the harmonized tariff schedule. What Brendan Croft, with his Wharton MBA and his $10,000 suit, failed to understand was that he hadn't just fired an employee. He had just bricked his entire supply chain. If you appreciate stories where quiet competence beats loud arrogance, where the people who do the actual work get the last word over the ones who just talk about it, then hit that like button and subscribe right now. I post new stories about corporate karma and earned justice every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming. I started at Global Market Imports in 1999. The company was a regional distributor then, run by its founder, a tough but feral German named Arthur Hemlock. He hired me out of the Navy, where I'd spent a decade managing logistics for the 6th Fleet. I knew how to move things from point A to a hostile point B on time and on budget. Arthur wanted to start importing specialty hardware from Germany and needed someone who understood the paperwork. For the first 2 years, it was just me and a phone. I learned everything there was to know about customs law, tariffs, duties, and the labyrinthine world of international freight. I studied for and passed the customs broker license examination, a notoriously difficult test with a pass rate often below 10%. I got the license in my own name, Franklin C. Wells. The company paid the fees, but the license itself was tied to my social security number. It was mine. A few years later, as we grew, we needed our own bonded warehouse to defer duty payments on imported goods. That required another set of federal certifications from Customs and Border Protection and the Alcohol and Tobacco, Tax and Trade Bureau, since we also handled some specialty German wines. Again, I was the one who did the work, filed the applications, and passed the inspections. The certifications were issued to me, personally, as the responsible party. I remember the day the final warehouse bond certificate came through. I took it to Arthur's office. He was a man of few words, but he understood leverage. He poured 2 glasses of single malt scotch. "Frank," he said, tapping the document with a thick finger. "Good work. Now listen to me. Keep these licenses in your name. All of them. The company will always pay the renewal fees, the insurance, whatever is needed. But the paper belongs to you. Think of it as insurance." "Insurance against what, Arthur?" I asked. He took a slow sip of his drink. "Against boys in expensive suits who have never loaded a pallet in their lives, but think they know how to run a business." He sold the company in 2015 and retired to a farm in the hill country. The new owners were a larger corporation that mostly left us alone as long as the numbers were good. And the numbers were always good. I built a team. We moved from hardware and wine to high-end electronics, medical equipment, and automotive parts. 1,200 containers a year coming into the port of Houston. Each one navigated through a sea of regulations, inspections, and payments, all under the legal authority of my licenses. My wife passed away in 2018. It was just me and Sarah after that. She's at the University of Texas now, studying to be a chemical engineer. Smart kid, making her mother proud. My GMI salary, a respectable $185,000 a year, paid the out-of-state tuition, her rent in Austin, and kept our house in the suburbs running. My entire life was built on the foundation of that job. It was stable. It was secure. Until it wasn't. The private equity vultures from Sterling Croft Capital arrived in February. The acquisition was hostile. They bought up a majority share and installed their own people. The first to go were the other old hands, the guys from Arthur Hemlock's era. The head of sales, the warehouse manager. I was kept on because, as I overheard one of the transition team consultants say, the import guy holds some kind of critical certification. They didn't even bother to learn my name or what exactly I did. Brendan Croft arrived a month later. He walked the floor once. He didn't ask questions. He just made pronouncements. He talked about disruption and paradigm shifts. He replaced the old coffee machines with a fancy espresso maker that no one knew how to use. He implemented a new hot desking policy that just meant nobody had a permanent place to put their family photos. Morale plummeted, but the quarterly reports, based on work done months earlier, still looked good. He was a success. His fatal error was arrogance. He assumed my role was just a title, a box on an org chart that could be swapped out. He saw a 55-year-old man making close to 200 grand and decided he could replace me with a recent graduate for $60,000 a year and a supply chain management degree. He never once asked to see the licenses. He never checked the federal databases. He just assumed the company owned them, like it owned the desks and the computers. He assumed wrong. After I got home from my termination, I didn't panic. I didn't call a lawyer. I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at my personal laptop, and pulled up the public vessel tracking website for the Port of Houston. I knew the shipping schedules by heart. The MSC Isabella, a container ship out of Hamburg, was due to arrive in 6 days. On board were 17 40-foot containers destined for GMI. Inside those containers was $12.8 million worth of high-precision German medical imaging equipment. Our biggest client, a major national hospital network, was waiting for them. The contract had a strict delivery clause. Penalties for being a day late started at $50,000. I knew that when the Isabella docked, the freight forwarder would file the entry summary with Customs and Border Protection. That filing would list Global Market Imports as the importer of record and list the customs broker license number. My license number. CBP's automated system would then check the status of that license. It would find that the license holder, Franklin C., Wells was no longer an employee of GMI. The filing would be rejected. The containers would be flagged. A customs hold would be placed on the entire shipment. The cargo would not be released from the port. Then the clock would start ticking. Demurrage fees. Port storage fees. $250 per container, per day. That's $4,250 a day, every day, until the cargo was cleared. And it could not be cleared without a licensed broker. Brendan had hired a replacement for me. I'd seen the kid on my way out. Looked about 24, fresh-faced, wearing a GMI polo shirt that was a size too big. Let's call him Chad. Chad might have a degree, but I knew for a fact he didn't have a customs broker license. There are fewer than 15,000 active licensed individuals in the entire country. Getting one takes years of study and experience. So I waited. I paid some bills. I called Sarah, and we talked about her midterms. I didn't mention the job. No need to worry her. I did some yard work. I cleaned out the garage. For 6 days, I was just a guy on an unexpected vacation. On the 7th day, a Tuesday, at 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. An automated email alert. The MSC Isabella had officially docked at the Bayport Container Terminal. The show was about to begin. The first sign of trouble would have been an automated rejection email from the CBP system. Chad, the new kid, probably saw it and had no idea what it meant. He'd likely try to refile, thinking he made a typo. It would be rejected again. Around noon on Wednesday, he would have gotten a call from the freight forwarder, a hardened, no-nonsense guy named Dave, asking why the GMI containers were on customs hold. Chad would have stammered something about a system glitch. Dave, who I'd worked with for 15 years, would have known something was wrong. By Wednesday afternoon, the first emails from the client, the hospital network, would have arrived. Status update on PO number 78,542. By Thursday morning, the panic would start to set in. Chad would have finally confessed to his immediate supervisor, one of Brendan's new hires, that he couldn't get the cargo released. That supervisor would have told him to find a solution. They'd call the port, CBP, the shipping line. Everyone would tell them the same thing. The filing was rejected because the broker of record was invalid. Brendan, insulated in his corner office, probably wouldn't have heard about it until Thursday afternoon. He'd have been furious. What do you mean we can't get our stuff? This is America. Just pay the tax and get it off the boat. He would have yelled at Chad, who was hopelessly out of his depth. He would have demanded his team leverage their synergies to optimize the outcome. I could almost picture the scene. A bunch of 20-somethings with business degrees, frantically Googling customs hold, while millions of dollars in vital medical equipment sat baking in the Texas sun. My phone rang for the first time on Friday morning. It was a number I didn't recognize. From the GMI office. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Carol, the HR manager. Her voice was tight with forced pleasantness. Hi, Frank. It's Carol. Hope you're doing well. Listen, we just have a quick question about some paperwork. Could you give me a call back when you get a chance? A quick question. I deleted the message. An hour later, my phone rang again. A different extension. I ignored it. Then, a text message from a number I did recognize. It was from Maria, my former assistant. Frank, they are losing their minds here. The hospital network is threatening to sue. What is going on? I texted her back. I was terminated, Maria. It's not my problem anymore. Hope you're well. The real call came on Friday afternoon. The caller ID said Sterling Croft Capital. This was the big one. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. Franklin Wells. The voice on the other end was deep, gravelly, and radiated impatience. Mr. Wells, this is Julian Croft. I believe you know my son, Brendan. The CEO, the big boss. I'm familiar with him, I said, my voice level. There seems to be some kind of administrative issue at the Port of Houston regarding one of our shipments. My people seem to think you might have some insight." His tone was accusatory, as if I had done something wrong. "There's no issue, Mr. Croft," I replied calmly. "The system is working exactly as it was designed to work. Your company attempted to import goods without a valid customs broker. Customs and Border Protection did their job and stopped it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing. I imagined him in a Park Avenue office, looking down on the city, furious that some analog employee was gumming up his machine. "My son tells me he terminated your employment," he said, the words clipped. "That's correct. On Tuesday of last week, at 3:15 p.m. And this license, it's in your name? My name, my social security number, my bond. The same goes for the bonded warehouse certification. As of 3:16 p.m. last Tuesday, Global Market Imports ceased to have a licensed customs broker or a certified bonded warehouse operator. Legally, you are no more qualified to import goods than a hot dog stand." The silence this time was heavier. I could hear the gears turning, the dawning comprehension of the scale of the catastrophe his son had created. The 17 containers at the port were just the beginning. There were 3 more ships on the water, with another 40 containers between them. All of it would be seized. The entire GMI import division, the core of the company's business, was paralyzed. "What is it going to take to fix this?" he finally asked. The accusation was gone, replaced by the cold pragmatism of a man who deals in numbers. "Fixing it implies I broke it," I said. "I didn't. Your son did. But I am a solutions-oriented person. I'd be happy to discuss a consulting agreement. I'll be at the GMI headquarters on Monday morning at 9. I suggest you and your son are both there." I hung up before he could reply. I spent the weekend setting up a new business entity, Wells Logistics Solutions, LLC. I drafted a simple, one-page consulting agreement with my terms. I didn't need a lawyer to write it. I'd spent 2 decades negotiating complex international contracts. This was easy. On Monday morning, I didn't drive my usual Ford F-150. I drove my wife's old Lexus, had it detailed, and wore my best suit. I walked into the GMI lobby at 8:59 a.m. The receptionist, who had watched me get walked out by security less than a week before, stared at me with wide eyes. "Franklin, they're waiting for you in the main boardroom." I walked down the familiar hallway. The door to the boardroom was open. Julian Croft stood by the window, a man in his late 60s with silver hair and a palpable aura of command. Brendan was sitting at the table, looking pale and sick. Carol from HR was there, as were 2 other executives from Sterling Croft I didn't recognize. They all looked at me as I entered. I walked to the head of the table, the seat Julian had left empty, and placed my briefcase down. "Good morning," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the tense silence. Julian turned from the window. "Wells, let's not waste time. We have a crisis. You created it. Now tell me the price to make it go away." I opened my briefcase and took out a single folder. "Let's be clear, Mr. Croft. I didn't create anything. Your chief synergy officer did. He made a decision without doing his due diligence. He dismantled a critical piece of your company's infrastructure and didn't realize it until the entire structure started to collapse. This isn't a crisis. It's a lesson in causality." Brendan flinched as if I'd slapped him. His father's eyes narrowed. "I am prepared to offer my services as an independent consultant to solve the immediate problem and ensure a smooth transition," I continued. I slid 5 copies of my proposal across the table. "These are my terms." Julian Croft picked one up. The other executives followed suit. Brendan just stared at his. The terms were simple. 1. An immediate re-engagement fee of $250,000, payable today to clear the 17 containers currently on hold at the port. This was non-negotiable. 2. Wells Logistics Solutions, LLC, would be retained as the exclusive customs brokerage and logistics consultant for global market imports. The contract would be for a minimum of 3 years. 3. The consulting fee would be $50,000 per month as a retainer. 4. In addition to the retainer, my company would charge a processing fee of $1,500 per container imported. Based on their current volume, that came to roughly $1.8 million a year. 5. I would have the sole authority to hire and train a replacement broker for them at their expense. The timeline for that would be at my discretion, within the 3-year contract period, until that person was fully licensed and certified, which could take years. All imports would go through my company. I watched Julian Croft's face as he read. His expression didn't change, but I saw a muscle twitch in his jaw. He was doing the math. The demurrage fees were already over $20,000. The penalty from the hospital network was about to hit $250,000. The value of the cargo itself was $12.8 million, and that was just the first ship. My price, while high, was significantly less than the cost of the disaster. "This is extortion," Brendan finally spat, finding his voice. His father shot him a look that could have curdled milk. "Silence," he commanded, without even looking at him. He turned his gaze back to me. "This is a steep price, Wells." "It's the market rate for saving a $450 million a year business from imploding due to executive incompetence," I replied. "My old salary was $185,000. You're now looking at paying my new company over $2 million a year for the exact same expertise. You could have had it for a bargain. Your son decided to streamline. This is the streamlined price." One of the other executives, a man with glasses, cleared his throat. "The warehouse. Is that part of this? The bonded certification?" "Of course," I said. "That's included in the retainer. For now. If you'd like to try and get a new warehouse certified, be my guest. The federal application process usually takes 12 to 18 months, assuming you can even find a qualified individual to sponsor it." The room fell silent again. They were trapped. Every road led back to me. They had no leverage, no alternative. The power dynamic had been completely inverted. I was no longer the analog experience. I was the only thing keeping their business alive. Julian Croft stared at me for a long, hard moment. I met his gaze without blinking. He was assessing me, not as an employee, but as an opponent. He finally gave a short, sharp nod. "Carol," he said, his voice flat, "get Treasury on the line. Wire $250,000 to this man's company. Get the contract signed. Today." He stood up and walked over to his son. He leaned down and spoke in a low, venomous voice that was still audible in the quiet room. "Pack your desk. You're done. I'm sending you to manage the lumberyard in North Dakota. Maybe you'll learn something about how real things work." Brendan's face went from pale to ashen. He looked like he was going to be sick. Julian didn't give him a second glance. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at me. "You'll have the signed contract and confirmation of the wire transfer within the hour, Mr. Wells. I expect that cargo to be moving by end of day." "It will be," I said. And then he was gone. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. The money was in my new business account by 10:30 a.m. I had the signed 3-year contract by 11 o'clock. From my home office, I logged into the CBP portal with my credentials, electronically signed the customs filings, and posted the necessary bond. By 2 p.m., the customs hold was lifted. The trucks started rolling out of the Port of Houston an hour later. Brendan Croft was fired just as his father had promised. His LinkedIn profile was updated a week later to sabbatical. I heard through the grapevine that he was, in fact, managing a failing lumber distribution center in Bismarck. The Brioni suits were probably not very practical there. Carol, the HR manager, was quietly let go a month later. The company called it a restructuring. The 2 executives who sat silently at that table now had to approve my monthly invoices. I made sure they were detailed and always submitted on time. Global market imports never recovered its previous profitability. My consulting fees ate deep into their margins. They were locked into my 3-year contract, paying a premium for the knowledge they once had in-house for a fraction of the cost. It was the most expensive lesson in the value of experience they would ever learn. My own life, however, transformed. I was making more money than I ever had, but I was working less. I set my own hours. The frantic 24/7 nature of the job was gone. I was a consultant, not a firefighter. I hired Maria, my old assistant, to run the administrative side of Wells Logistics, paying her 30% more than GMI ever did. The best part was the freedom. 2 months after the showdown, I flew to Austin for Parents' Weekend. I took Sarah and her friends out for a nice dinner. I wasn't checking my phone for shipping alerts or customs emails. I was just there, listening to my daughter talk about her classes, her future. I had fulfilled the promise I made to her mother. She would graduate without a cent of debt, her future secured not by a job I held, but by a business I owned. Sometimes I drive down to the port and watch the giant container ships glide in. They are monuments to a complex world, a world of systems and rules that most people never see. The men in the corner offices, the Brendan Crofts of the world, they see lines on a spreadsheet, salaries to be cut, efficiencies to be gained. They never see the foundation until they've taken a sledgehammer to it themselves. They think experience is a liability, an expense. They forget that sometimes the old guy they're streamlining isn't just a part of the machine. He's the one holding the key. My name is Franklin Wells. I'm 55 years old, and I am the key.